That's exactly what's happening. Shay, there's no time to fuck around, all right? We have had too many technical setbacks. Who knows? They could start again at any moment. I have a question for you about serial murderings.
Okay.
Are you emotionally prepared to handle this question?
After this past week, Ian, I am ready for the most fucked up shit you could possibly ask me.
Prove it to me.
Prove
Give me
it.
some sort of prove it. Give me some sort of indication. How do I know? How can I trust you after all this true crime, where I find out that you're probably more likely to murder me than anyone else?
I agree. Is that enough? Just saying like the ha-cha-cha. Yeah, you go, boy.
I'm just gonna give you a second to reflect on what you did wrong just there. Like we're gonna let that sit. We're just gonna marinate in that for a moment.
It was the finger guns, huh? You're just
It was a lot. Shay, it was so many things. All right, so Shay, my question for you is, and for all the listeners out there, you can play along at home if you like. Who was America's first serial killer?
Well, we all know the answer to that. Of course, it was the entire slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, murdering hundreds of thousands of African Americans. And second place, of course, is the massacre we did to the Native Americans who existed long before we were here. That's my final answer, Regis. What do you got for me?
I love that you've set me up in such a way that I can't just come out and say that you're wrong because fuck. So thanks for nothing. Thanks for absolutely nothing. All right. Thank you for biting the hand that feeds you. For the sake of anyone who might still be curious, like I'm sure everyone else is like, oh, Ian, just let it go. Just start the show. Let's just go. Let's start the show. You know, did you ever watch Daria, the show Daria?
Yeah, I loved Daria.
Remember that show she was next on Six Sad World?
No, I don't remember that at all. I loved Daria so much, clearly. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I love Daria. I watched it every Thursday night at 9 p.m. when it came out, all the new episodes. But I don't know what happened, who did what, or what they talked about.
I just remember her being kind of like a sassy bitch and me being all about it. I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, Daria the Explorer, you know, and she spoke Spanish. Come on, kids, let's go exploring.
That's pretty good. That was a pretty good joke there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I did, you know what, I did promise, I guess I promised you off the record, but, you know, I do think this is pretty interesting. Our first serial killer, and Shay and I had several technical issues. We actually had a really great cold open, and then we lost it. So what you're getting is like this, like, I don't know, limp-dicked...
Sloppy seconds.
Like, sloppy seconds, yeah. Sorry, gang. Yeah, so the first serial killer, you gave some really fucking goofy name, and the name that you gave isn't far off from what this guy's name
Jebediah Cleghorn.
Jebediah Cleghorn. This guy's name was Herman Mudgett, which is pretty similar.
You know what's funny is I said Jebediah Cleghorn the first time around, and I'm pretty sure I know someone named Jebediah Cleghorn. I'm pretty sure you might too. I think they were our friend Brody's roommate when Brody lived at the CLO in Gainesville.
Oh my God, I completely forgot the Cooperative Living Organization,
yeah,
right?
I'm pretty sure there was someone there named Jebediah Cleghorn. And I was like, this seems like a weird, rednecky, like Mormon murderer name.
I remember being single and going there and just being like, maybe girls here will think I'm cool because I have my own apartment.
Oh God, that's so sad.
It was a sad time for Ian, all right? Like, I didn't turn it around until far too late in life. So anyway, before we move on really quick, I don't know, like this Herman Mudgett guy is pretty interesting. So like, he basically became a doctor or like a pharmacist, moved to Chicago, took the name Dr. H.H. Holmes, and then began killing people to steal their property, all right? He built
wow.
a house for himself. So he built this house, which was basically specifically designed to be a fucking torture chamber. All right.
Jesus Christ.
The nickname was Murder Castle, and it was equipped with secret passages, trap doors, soundproof rooms, doors that could be locked from the outside, gas jets to asphyxiate victims, and a kiln to cremate bodies. Okay.
Wow.
So at peak murder mudget, during the World Columbian Exposition in Chicago, 1893, he allegedly seduced and murdered a number of women, typically by becoming engaged to them and then killing them after securing control of their life savings. He would also require his employees to carry life insurance policies, naming him as a beneficiary, so he could murder them and then collect the money off them. And then some of these bodies he would sell to local medical schools.
How can you not get caught for this? Like immediately?
If you were a white guy in the 19th century, and he was a good looking dude. Honestly, he was a good looking cat. I don't know what it is about, we let good looking men get away with anything. I mean, Thor could murder and have sex with me, and I would be like, it's fine. It's Chris Hemsworth. Do you, Thor.
Well, I love how you started the episode already diving heavy into true crime. I feel like I was just listening to My Favorite Murder. You're just really setting the stage and be like, okay, so this guy had a house. And that was very, very true crime of you. So my hat's off to you. I'm not actually taking my hat off. It's under my headphones. It seems like far too much work for what you did. But yeah, Ian, so great start to the show, but we do have an amazing show ahead of us still. We have a featured artist. We decided to go a poppier route today. We have our lovely intern in charge of music now, and she got the amazing Willie Shaw with his song Needed Somebody, which I think perfectly matches the tone of today's episode. You can hear it playing underneath me right now, and doesn't this make you just want to think about people dying and being murdered at the hands of Jeremiah Cleghorn?
Jeremiah Cleghorn.
In 19th century America.
And good old Herman Mudgett, who could forget. I'm sure Willie Shaw is not going to appreciate this. We're like, next body you hack up, pop on some Shaw.
Well, it's a great song, so make sure you stick around to the end to hear it in its entirety. And then also check out our playlist. You'll find it there. Great guy, great song. Check it out.
So anyway, some of you are probably wondering, Ian and Shay, we true crime is very popular. We know all about it. Why do we need to sit here and listen to you proselytize, preach to us about why it might be good or bad? Well, we've got some food for thought for you, okay? So Shay and I have been kind of mulling over this idea that is this or is this not a problematic genre? If you cannot get consent from the people that you are making content about, is that an issue? So some fun facts about just true crime and receiving and listening to true crime in general. Increased consumption of true crime news reports actually decreases people's objective knowledge about the prevalence of crime. So, Shay, what do you think of that?
That makes sense. I feel like that's totally in line with my perception of this kind of stuff. I mean, I imagine what they're saying, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong here. I imagine what they're saying with this is that they have an overrepresentation of how much crime or what crime looks like. Is that right?
Exactly. You hear about some of these sensational murders, and you're like, "Oh my God, I could be next," and it couldn't be farther from the truth. So fears sparked by perceptions of crime influence decisions about where to live, how to raise children, where to invest social wealth, what punitive government actions to support, and how to view groups perceived as likely criminals, a broad range of choices and attitudes that affect the quality of a society and its political life. And Shay, an upsetting, I don't know if you, before this camp, I would have thought that women were murdered at a higher rate than men, but it turns out that's probably just my exposure to true crime. Turns out the opposite is true.
The opposite is true, and I think we might talk about this more later, but apparently the criticism of, this is a Meninist talking point that comes up all the time. It's actually, men are murdered a lot more than women, and why aren't we talking about that? It's an anti-feminist talking point, which I feel super weird, touching, actually, if I'm being totally honest, with cancel culture banging at the back door. But it is a fact, and I don't know, it is interesting when we're talking about crime. to realize that it's actually men who are murdered more.
Well, honestly, it's like so funny, like based on what I see in media and the way that like, especially the way that white women's like murders or abductions get covered in the media, you would think that like every white woman in America is in the gravest fucking danger. But yeah, so it's like, I don't know, like even learning those statistics. And again, like it's like troubling because you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then you go, oh, I have to talk about this. Yeah. I'm a straight white guy, and that's going to come out of my mouth.
Well, I'm glad you started the conversation. If anything, I could be like, well, I was just responding to Ian's point. So actually, if anyone's listening, I was just responding to Ian's point.
All right, so I guess, and like, this is actually kind of accidentally topical, okay? Because like with the recent uptick in violent crime, apparently there's been a 4% increase in like murder in the country after like a historic criminal low. And now there's like all this talk, especially following all these conversations of like defund the police. And now Biden's coming out saying like, oh yeah, like let's use leftover COVID funds to like increase police budgets after like a pretty upsetting year of fucking police brutality against like Black Lives Matter protesters. So it's like kind of shady your point. Like, how do we have a rational conversation so that we don't make any like bad political decisions about like a subject as emotional as like murder and rape and assault and like all these fucking awful, terrible things?
Yeah. A lot of really big questions. And we talk about that in a little bit of our captain's log. So I don't want to blow our load too fast. So before we get to all that goodness, let's have those idiots from the past, our former selves, past Ian and past Shay, take it away with Ignorance in a Bottle.
Ignorance in a bottle. Ignorance in a bottle. In a bottle.
Hello, and welcome to Ignorance in a Bottle. It's Ignorance time capsule to encapsulate our ignorance before we dive into the internet. To showcase just how ignorant we were before the internet. Oh my god. Hi, Shay. Anyway.
I'm shaking my head in fatherly disapproval to anyone listening.
Shay, okay. True crime, I feel like this is mostly a podcast industry at this point, right? Like, but then I remembered the television show Unsolved Mysteries. Did you ever watch this shit?
No.
You never watched Unsolved Mysteries? The guy, like, it was always started the same way, like, it would be like, this is a show about murders and mysteries that were never solved by totally competent and not fucking stupid ass fuck police.
Well, that's like the same thing as like America's Most Wanted, Forensic Files.
Joe, I mean, no, but like sometimes there were, I guess, you know what, this is a little different because sometimes there were ghosts on America's Unsolved Mysteries, but like they were always a little spookier. But I forgot about, what was that, Forensic Files?
Forensic Files, yeah. I don't know what channel
that was. What the hell was that on?
I think that, I don't know, man. I feel like it was on True TV, but I never had True TV, so I don't, like, maybe History Channel or Discovery? Maybe it was on Discovery? I really have no idea.
Were you one of those kids that went over to his richer friends' houses and like, you know, just kind of let themselves in, grab the remote and be like, hey, what are we watching? Whoa, look at all these channels, boys.
I didn't have a richer friend. I had a friend who had cable.
But you were the rich friend.
Maybe I was the rich friend, which is like very sad considering.
Oh no.
But
yo, Shay's got a roof. We're going to Shay's
My house just had the drum set, but Charlie's house he had basic cable, which was the real thrill. So we went over there. But yeah, no, sometimes we just go in and put. Honestly, I just went and played this fucking Xbox. But,
I had a friend for every occasion. Zach Reiner had the N64. Michael Patterson had the big screen TV in Grand Theft Auto. David Tomlinson had the vanilla handy snack puddings, whose mother told her to stop letting me into the house because I kept eating them. And finally he was like, Mom says you can't come in. And I once tried to break into his house to get to the pudding snacks.
I don't doubt that at all.
Literally through the skylight.
I really do take all of that as just a big flex that you had more friends than me. Just because I had Charlie with his basic cable and you had all these different friends with all these different perks.
I think I just named 3 people.
Okay, Ian, rub it in more, why don't you?
Look at Ian knowing 3 people in his youth. True crime. Scientists call true crime content that centers around crime that is true. So I went to look at this list to see, it's like, all right, maybe I'm like unknowingly listening to true crime without even knowing it. And, you know, like there is definitely, I think the big famous ones that everybody knows about, there's Serial, which apparently like launched the podcast phenomenon itself. Like once one serial gave way to that like that gritty investigative journalism. Like, what was the guy's name? The guy that murdered the girl?
I have no idea. I never listened to Serial.
That's very interesting because yesterday I feel like you were coming to its defense. You were coming in hot. You were like,
I
no.
was?
You know what? I think maybe it's just sometimes we have these conversations where I'm like, I don't like this thing. And you're like, well, I don't know. I think it's pretty good.
I didn't think it was good. I just thought it was popular. And I was like, well, if we're going to do something, let's make it about something popular.
But it was popular like 2015. So like Serial was like the big one. And then some other ones that, of course, I've like My Favorite Murder. We got into, I feel like, not a heated discussion, but I had beef with We Got Murder on the podcast episode that we did. And then last podcast on the left, which is like the quintessential comedy true crime podcast. And then all this other shit, like Case File, Crime Junkie, Up and Vanished, Criminal, Someone Knows Something, S-Town, In the Dark, Atlanta Monster, Sword and Scale, Dr. Death, To Live and Die in L.A.
I think we get
Town.
it. I think we get it.
Okay, do you get it? I can name a couple more.
I bet you can.
What do you listen to true crime? Yes or no?
No, but I honestly, I think it's interesting that you only see it as a podcast medium because I don't see it. I see it as like just a medium. It's a genre that's not defined by a medium.
I think that these days, it's like predominantly, it's very popular with the podcast. I mean, I don't know, like, again, like I remember Unsolved Mysteries, Case Files, like there was another one you named. What was that called?
America's Most Wanted, I think is what I
America's Most, I guess that is true crime. I never thought of that. And then in that case, is Cops true crime?
I don't know. I mean, that's an interesting question. But I mean, honestly, there's like Making a Murderer was like a huge fucking Netflix smash hit. And that was all like a docu-series about that. Like, I think like on Netflix, there's a ton of these little, I mean, I don't watch them. So this is kind of just more my impression, but like, I think it's like everywhere. Like, I think you're a pod guy. So you're looking for pod stuff. And I'm like, I don't do any, actually, okay.
You're just a human being. You're just, look at me. Oh, I'm just I'm just
a boy
not me.
Trapped in a man's body, being exposed to all this murder porn shit.
I mean, Ian, you define yourself by the things you consume, but like me, I'm just Shay, you know? I'm just me.
I'm just me. Well, you know what's interesting is like, most of my media is YouTube stuff. And I actually do even see some true crimey stuff on YouTube. And I was talking with Stephanie about like this in preparation for the camp. And she's like, well, you were kind of watching some true crime stuff recently, weren't you? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, all that criminal psychology video shit you were watching. I was like, oh shit, you're right. Like I was watching and it's nothing I'm proud of, but like I would just like go on and they're like, this was the Parkland shooter. Like I watched his criminal deposition recently, but with like some like analytical breakdown of his like behavior and what he was like he was trying to pretend like he was crazy, right? And I was just watching this with like basically a narrator like dubbing over it. And I was like, oh, I didn't think of that. I was like, I guess that's true crime, like in like a sense, right?
So I'm really glad you bring this up because there's 2 points that I want to, you can see me holding up 2 fingers. There's 2 points. There's 2 points I want to kind of like expand on is I feel like there is the rationalization of why people like true crime. And then I feel like there is the like actual reason they like true crime. And I'll focus on this and touch on the second point later. But basically, like, that's the rationalization I always hear. It's like, oh, like, I'm just really interested in human psychology. And it's like, all right, name like 3 other psychologists that aren't Freud and Jung.
At that point, I feel like that's such like the pedant's point because it's like
maybe that is.
It's like I like hip hop. It's like, well, name the artist. Like if you ask like most people, they're like, I don't know what's on my Discover Weekly. I still like hip hop.
As soon as I said that, I'm like, oh God, like I don't want name. I always see these memes about like guys like, oh, I name 3 bands. I'm like, I would never do that. And I'm like, name 3 psychologists. But like, I don't know, like, it just seems like, I don't know, like, is abnormal psychology just like the low hanging fruit of psychology? It's like the one mental illness we're still allowed to make fun of is like cannibalism or something.
Oh my God. Well, I don't know, man, because I was thinking like even just like thinking about the mentality that goes into like consuming this media generally. And I was thinking like I sometimes find myself going down the rabbit hole on Reddit, the subreddit of public freakout. Are you subscribed to that subreddit at all?
We are subscribed to that subreddit on the Camp Re-Education subreddit page. You can go there and discuss your favorite episodes, which host you find more handsome, and generally, and that's the only two things you can talk about on our subreddit. But yeah, I've seen that, and no, I think honestly, like you're totally right. I think that. And I interrupted your point, but finish that idea.
Well, I think you saw where I was going, but yeah, like the intensity, like often the violence, like this weird, like carnal, dark side of like human psychology is what bubbles up in a lot of the videos on that subreddit. And I think like there feels like there's a parallel here between like consuming even like the most polished true crime stuff. I think still has some commonalities with I don't know, just like watching two people beat the shit out of each other in public.
God, I guess, and this was the other point I was going to make was like, when we first did podcast camp and we had this like really heated discussion about, and if, anybody who hasn't heard it, it's funny, podcast camp isn't our favorite. We were still kind of like early in, but like, I think there was a lot of really great discussions to be had there.
Yeah.
So go back and check it out. It's a classic. Like I went off on true crime. But like what I was thinking about today as we were preparing to talk about this is like, true crime isn't just murder. Like lots of shit could technically fall under the purview of true crime, and including freaking out in a 7-Eleven and beating someone half to death. Like I watched, it's so funny you mentioned public freakout. I watched a video the other day of like these guys getting into an argument, this one guy being very racist to this, Hispanic man, Latino man, basically using like, using the S word at this man, like you S word, you fucking S word. And the guy was like, let's take this outside. And then he shoots the fucking guy. And I was like, this is really fucking entertaining.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Shay, I feel like that you took that personally. You really...
You're like, I watched this man get executed and I was entertained. It's like, oh, but I mean, shit.
But this is what true crime is. True crime is literally like the presentation of some of humanity's darkest moments as consumption, as entertainment. Like it's definitely not, I mean, I don't know, like, okay, if you had to break it down and give it a percentage, what percentage do you think is educational? What percent do you think is entertainment? And like, I guess maybe the big question at the heart of this when talking about true crime is like, is it problematic to turn something like this into entertainment for our pleasure?
Well, that's what we talked about before. I mean, that was your whole like diatribe. It's funny, as soon as I say diatribe, I'm like, I feel like I'm calling you out, but like, I mostly agreed with it. But like, yeah, like your critique of it in podcast camp was just that it was, yeah, it's dark and it's whatever. But I don't know. I think it's a false dichotomy to say it's like how much is entertainment versus education. Like I think it could be both, and it occupies like both spheres like in different ways.
And this is something that like I this is a hump I can't seem to get over. And I think this is the thing that I'm going to have to like really kind of come to terms with as we dive into this camp is like, is there a moral question in here about like the way that we've managed to kind of capitalize on tragedy and misfortune and turn it into very, very disposable media? Like, I feel like it goes hand in hand with this kind of mentality about people that like they're NPCs basically. Like, I don't have to feel any specific way towards anybody around me. Like, all that matters is that like I get my fucking McBurger King as fast as humanly possible, and anybody that prevents that from happening to me is an inconvenience. Like, they're not people with their own consciences and lives and like, rich inner worlds. Like, they're literally just in my fucking way. And it's kind of like the same mentality with true crime, where it's just like this is just this exists for me. Like, it's too wow, sucks it happened to them, but that's like totally not my problem.
So you think you're worried or exploring the idea that maybe this is just a lack of empathy on behalf of the consumer?
And it's funny because like I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm not saying that it's this genre's thing, but I am also I'm wondering if this is just like, I don't know, a symptom of a larger systemic issue, where like, again, like we're so removed from each other. We listen to our like lowest human moments as entertainment. Like, God, I'm really fucking bored. Cool. Oh, wow. A story about this woman who was stabbed 27 times and then drowned in a water tower. This will help me get through traffic.
You know what I'm actually really curious about? Because one thing we talked about when we talked about true crime before was I don't think we understood the gender divide within it. And I feel like we're definitely going to have to address that like a lot more, because it seems like true crime is primarily a genre of content consumed by women. And I guess like, I feel like we can hypothesize about why that is, but frankly, that seems like treading in dangerous waters. So I'll pose the question to you first.
Was that even a question, or was that just a statement?
Yeah. Why do you like? Why would you imagine? Why do you think women consume it more than men, if that's true?
So why do I think women consume it more than men because so I'm going to use My Favorite Murder as like my example for this, because this is like why they're extremely popular with women, because they look at, I think, a lot of these lenses through, I think they look at a lot of these cases through a patriarchal lens, or like a feminist lens, I guess it would say, examining like a patriarchal society where a woman is expected not to like, be polite when being advanced upon, like not be firm, not be direct, be like, oh, haha, thank you, but no thank you, or like, not like be, kind and stuff like that. Like all of these women abducted by like Ted Bundy, basically. He's like, oh, can you help me bring something to my car in this very dark, secluded, parking garage? And they were like, well, I don't want to be rude, because they've been conditioned to think this way. So I think a lot of it is maybe that, like maybe this whole like, oh my God, like this could have been me. So maybe for women it is a more empathetic thing, but maybe for men it's just like, splat.
Do you think that's what? I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like on one hand, I could see that idea, but on the other hand, is that patronizing to women to be like, oh, well, they have a very noble reason to have a dark side? It's kind of like the argument we talked about with that Zizek quote, where what is it? Like the West won't even allow previously colonized countries to be villains in their own narrative. They're like, oh, it's not your fault. You're a dictator. Ignore what he did. We did that. Yeah, we did that. We were the colonizers. Like any bad stuff you do, that was our fault ultimately. Like it denies them even the autonomy of being evil. It's like, no, and in that way it's patronizing. So I wonder, like, I don't know. I'm curious if that's just an easy way to get someone off the hook and just be like, oh, well, the patriarchy. So go ahead and consume as much murder and violence and rape as you possibly could.
Well, I think, I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but I'm just saying like, I'm saying like, I think that's the narrative most commonly heard. I'm kind of inclined to agree with that point. Like, I think it's kind of giving people a pass. The same way when they're like, oh, well, like, I'm just really interested in human psychology. And it's just like, but just like one part. Like, you're not interested in like, the development of like empathy or consciousness or like, solipsism or, well, I guess like solipsism isn't exactly what I'm thinking of. Anyway, but it's like you're not interested in like any of these like really complicated technical like components that go into like making a person. You're just interested in like the people that fucking broke. It's just like, whoa, some of us come out wrong.
Right. And you know what? One of the ideas that I was thinking about when I was first thinking about this as well was like, this feels somewhat related also to an idea we talked about in Reality TV Camp when we were talking about like kind of the car crash aspect of watching it, or like a train crash. Like you're seeing like something, like you're seeing like real human tragedy unfold in front of you. And there's something, I don't know, weirdly exciting about that. I mean, again, it's like this dark side, like this lure to like a dark side of humanity generally. And maybe that's what people are saying when they're saying that they're interested in the psychology. They're interested in dark humanity. And that's just the way that they express it. Because I mean, like, I don't know, like if you don't know anything about psychology, then maybe that's what you mean to be saying when you're doing it. Because like, I don't know anything about psychology, and like I would probably say like, yeah, I mean, in fact, I was saying it when I was watching the YouTube channel. I think it's called something criminal psychology or something close to that.
Something criminal psychology.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I thought I was consuming. I was like, oh, this is like a criminal psychology channel. And I mean, the narrator like does go into like, okay, what he's about to do here is called this. And like they go through and explain, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. But like, I'm still watching the Parkland shooter like pretend to be crazy to cops and like talk about like killing people and like inner demons and like all this crazy shit. I mean, that is true crime, even though I don't think I thought of it, or it's not the kind of true crime I would normally associate with true crime.
I've got a really interesting friend, and he says that. So he and I talked about this like previously, and he said that I think the appeal to this stuff is that people actually hate victims. And there's almost this contempt towards these people, like, and where it's just like, you stupid fucking idiot. Look at how you got murdered. That would never happen to me. And it's almost like this like Schadenfreude of like being able to listen to this and being like, well, I would never navigate a social situation like this. And it's like a survival narrative of sorts. And there's also, I think, culturally too, and it's weird because like I think we're focusing very heavily on the murder aspect because I think when people hear the word true crime, that's the shit they think of. They think of like the murder thing. Like I feel like there's more, and maybe just because there's more murders than there are museum heists. You know,
that's true.
But yeah, like I almost feel like we as a society fucking like celebrate serial killers. Like we're like there almost seems to be like this sort of macabre delight in having produced John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy and Charles Manson. Like it's almost like there's this like kind of sick fucking glee. And it's like, well, you want to know how interesting America is? Check out these motherfuckers.
Well, not even like American villains, but worldwide. Like I feel like you talk about that with obviously famously like Hitler and Stalin and you know all these other big people who are. I mean,
are we counting them as serial killers?
I mean, they're genocidal. I know it's like when you get to a scale like that, you don't think of it the same. But no, I mean, like they're obviously like incredibly murderous. Like you know, they killed way more people than John Wayne Gacy, and like were way less humane. I mean, I don't know if I don't want to compare it, but I think there's something else you talked about too. Like you do talk a lot about murder, and you don't talk a lot about bank heists. But I feel like you touched on even when you touched on last podcast on the left. Is like all the spooky shit. Does that count as true crime?
Well, they do serial killer stuff.
Yeah, but they also do like ghosts and giants and like shit like that. Does that? And you, I mean, even you were talking about the one unsolved mysteries or whatever. Is that? I mean, is the spookiness is like a ghost thing? That's not true crime, is it?
I wouldn't. No, I don't think that counts as true crime unless the ghost is killing people and they're like, "A ghost killed my family." It's just like some fucking farmer, and they pull up to his house, and everyone's dead. He's like, "It was a ghost."
Yeah, but also to your point before about like, I think there are a lot of synonyms for like notorious. I can only think of one other, and like infamous. Like obviously, like there's an idea that we like hold on to as like a species, and at least as English speakers, where we're like, okay, this means something. Like this is important to us. We have multiple words to express this idea. So obviously this idea is somewhat important to us. But I think you're right. Like there is something about like having maybe like the antagonist of a story, of a narrative. And I guess like on some levels, like maybe like, you know, the Ted Bundy documentary thing. Like, yeah, like he's like an anti-hero almost. Like we think of him as a villain, but like when you tell his story, like, you know, then he like occupies kind of a similar role to like the Joker movie. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, we like watching this because it's like an evil person like doing their evil thing, you know?
Yeah. Oh. Let me ask you just a little bit of a random question. If you had to pick like a genre like you respected more, or a version of true crime you respected more, do you respect the comedy true crime or like the really serious like investigative journalism true crime? Like which of the two are you more inclined to like veer toward and be like, okay, hell yeah.
To actually respect?
I don't, maybe respect isn't the right term, but sure, fuck it. Let's stick with respect for the sake of time.
Okay, for the sake of time, respect. I guess I respect the more serious one. Like I'd probably respect Serial more than I would respect Last Podcast on the Left in terms of like respect. I mean, I think I would probably like Last Podcast on the Left more, but I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like I would like the comedy makes more sense to me. If you're going to cover a topic like this and it's just going to be like, it is for entertainment. I think at least the comedy tries to like bring to light the absurdity of the human condition in the sense that like we are here for a very brief fucking time. We're all anxious about death. We might as well try to just like highlight the absurdity of death generally and like maybe take the sting out of it in that capacity. So it's like, I feel like if you're going to have this kind of stuff, like maybe it's better to have it in this fucking like, silly format and make light of it because it's just like, I don't know, like the super serious stuff, like I almost feel like it's kind of playing more into our fears and making us generally more paranoid as a group of, as a, society. Well, communities,
Well, I guess we have a lot to explore this coming week in the world of true crime. So anything you want to say, Ian, before we hand it back off to those much more intelligent versions of ourselves?
I do not. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Bye.
Ignorance in a bottle. Ignorance in a bottle. In a bottle.
Ian and Shay, always a delightful, not that a menage, duo to just hear eschew their ignorantest of thoughts on the matter. If you're just joining us, I'm Terry Gross or something from some generic.
You really got me with your something there.
I don't know. Shay, let me ask you: have you following? It's been a week later. We've been watching tons of stuff. Is there anything like from that stands out, that jumps out at you like immediately that you just feel completely different about?
I don't know. And I'll tell you why. It's because I actually haven't listened to Ignorance in a Bottle since I edited it. So I'm not entirely sure, frankly. I'm gonna go on a hunch here and say yes. But I don't know what it is. But I'll throw it back to you as well. How about you, Ian? What do you think?
Let me answer your question with a question that'll take us out of that. Do you remember? Did you ever see that meme that was like floating around for a while? But like, if I ever get murdered, I want 2 drunk white women with a podcast to like solve my murder or whatever. Like, did you ever see that?
No, but I love it.
If you were murdered, would you want there to be like a podcast episode about like your victimization? Because that's kind of how it starts. It's usually just like, so-and-so was living a normal life as a human bookshelf.
The most normal of lives, of course.
The most normal of lives.
Human bookshelves for Jeff Bezos, standing in the corner, much like Beauty and the Beast furniture, just holding some books for someone.
I love this like horror movie version of Beauty and the Beast where Jeff Bezos is the beast, and it wasn't a witch that turned everybody into furniture. It was just like capitalism or something like that. Like,
yes.
Yeah. What are these? This teacup is a man. Like, he needs a job, doesn't he?
Yeah. I guess I don't have a problem with, I don't know. All right. When you first asked me just now, there's a part of me that's like, you know what? I guess I don't care. Like, I'm gonna die eventually. Like, if this creates more of a legacy for me, like, maybe that's cool. Maybe it would be nice to have a legacy, and maybe my favorite murder and all of her murderinos knowing about me makes me, cooler or remembered longer.
You know what? I wonder if like we were to put murderinos on the spot and just be like, all right, so what is your favorite murder? They'd be like, well, there's just so many, I can't pick. And I'm like, I think that's part of the problem. It's just like, they've become lost in their sheer anonymity of the catalog of the show.
That's a great and interesting point.
Yeah. So, yeah. I'm coming for you, girls. Oh, God.
That's a quote for the mug.
Oh, my God. Oh, no. So, listen, I will say this. I listened to a couple, episodes of My Favorite Murder, and they did, like I was mentioning earlier, They did this report of this woman that was murdered, and like I almost feel bad being like these white women that get murdered get all the attention, because that feels like a fucked up meninist thing to say. But they brought up so they had this really interesting episode, and then they brought up this like really upsetting news. Like, so there was this case I listened to where this woman was murdered by her sociopathic husband. She was pregnant, and apparently it was like all over the news in California. Like, it caused such a stir. Like, it was like, oh, this poor like woman, we can't believe like this happened to her. Like, this like couldn't have happened to a more innocent human being.
Are you talking about the Chris Watt murders?
No. This is a different one. It's just like one woman, and one woman of many, and who get murdered and thrown on a podcast. And like they talked about just how sensationalized it was, to the extent that like half the people related on both sides of the issue were like getting book deals and like writing books about this and like starting foundations. And then they were like, so here's some upsetting news. There was apparently an El Salvadorian woman living in the same fucking town, like the same time, basically. Same thing. She was pregnant. She was murdered. It was probably her partner at the time. And it got like zero press coverage. There was just like very little investigative work done. So, I mean, she was completely relegated to anonymity. So I think like my big thing was, like when it was just like this sensational, like, blonde bombshell on a milk carton thing. I was like, oh God, like this it feels weird. It feels, sensationalist. It feels exploitative. But then when you put it in the context, kind of like you said, if what happened to you is completely passed over, and this is a way for your story to actually get told and actually get attention after, like, for racial bias issues and like our fucked up hyper conservative media apparatus just completely doesn't deem you worthy of being a story to tell, and then someone does decide to tell your story, then like I'm like, okay, well, like fuck, that's like good and important. And I think like that really made me go, like, I can't believe I was just looking at it at like, the white cheerleader who got her head chopped off and on Makeout Hill or whatever.
That's interesting. So are you saying that you would feel better if someone took the death of this Central American woman and found a way to profit off of her demise as well, then you'd be more okay?
Exactly. It's an untapped market, all right? And this is what capitalism has to offer you, South America.
Cool.
Honestly, all this is like a roundabout way of saying, I think my mind changed coming out of ignorance and a ball. But that's the thing that did it. That's what I was like, I think that was my big reservation. And it's like, maybe in certain capacities, I think it can be good. So, ignorance in a bottle aside, you and I both did a ton of research this week. We had a ton of things on our minds. We were thinking nonstop because we're just, I mean, come on, we're the world's most important influencers. And you had what I thought was maybe the most interesting thought that as soon as I heard you say this, I was like, that makes a lot of fucking sense. So let's hear that. Let's talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please welcome Passion.
All right, I'm going to go out on a ledge, but just hear me out. Do you think that consuming true crime will turn people into Republicans? So my thought here is basically that all of the conservative news outlets use a lot of fear-mongering tactics to scare people into voting a certain way, a certain set of policies. And I think because their tactic is so ingrained with showing the dark sides of humanity, that maybe the fact that true crime is also relying heavily on this dark aspect of human nature, that just by virtue of consuming this type of content, you may actually be pushing someone more to a conservative mindset, more concerned about traditional values of like law and order and like good guys and bad guys and these oversimplified narratives that are devoid of nuance. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that there needs to be nuance in some of the murder cases that we talk about with true crime. I think in a lot of these cases, there was a bad deed done and that's fine. But I think just the sheer frequency and the unnatural frequency that people are being shown these things. And when I say unnatural, I mean unnatural compared to the frequency that they actually happen in one's day-to-day life. If that might scare someone into being a little bit more conservative and maybe one day even voting more conservatively just because it matches with their new perception of danger around them. So I don't know. Am I going too far out here, or what do you think, Ian? Let me know.
I did some research on My Favorite Murder. I found an article about like demographics, the show in general, like women's interest in it. And I'm like, I read that most of the largest segment of the My Favorite Murder audience is, white cis women. And I'm thinking about, what was it, like 50% of white women voted for Donald Trump? And like, that's the thing. That's what I think of when I hear your point. And I'm like, oh my God, like that probably makes sense. Like when Trump is on stage and he's like, we're going to bring back law and order to this. That's not how he talks. But like, yeah, the same thing. And they're like, oh my God, I just listened to My Favorite Murder. Thank God he's bringing this back. That's sexist. But that's what I think of. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's funny because like when I was having this, when I was like thinking about this, even when I was recording the Captain's Log, I was having a really tough time like articulating like the idea. But even when you were talking about the why you should care thing at the beginning, I realized that that's the same idea. That when you think that crime is higher than it is, when it's sensationalized either by true crime or even by like the nightly news in a lot of places, it does have an effect on like the decisions you're making. Like if you're afraid that someone, dude, honestly, like I had recently, like Stephanie and I we've been watching all this true crime, right? And like I was talking with her in here, and I was talking, and I made I like was loud for a second, like as a joke or something. And then while I was being loud, I thought I heard something in the living room, and it was just us two. It was late at night, and I was like, oh shit, what the fuck was that? So I was like, I have a bat here, like a steel bat. So I grabbed the bat, and I just like open my bedroom door, and I like kind of rush into the living room to be like, what's out here? You know, like ready to like throw down or whatever. And then of course there was nothing. You know, my imagination just ran wild. But this has been happening now kind of throughout the week. Like I've been crossing the street when there was people behind us, because there was this guy walking too close to me, and I was like, I don't know. So I grabbed Stephanie, we walked across the street, and then I looked at the guy afterwards, and he's just like a hipster dude. Looked like he probably honestly came out of the same building I was in, like whatever. Like not to be like stereotyping people, but like clearly there was no need to be alarmed. Like he was just on his phone, you know, like nothing to worry about. And yeah, it's interesting how much like consuming this kind of media in the quantities that they're consumed can change the way you perceive things around you.
You know what it's funny that you say that, because now I'm reminded of when I first moved to Lebanon. I mean, like literally, like my parents were just in an active attempt to try to discourage me from going, like keeping the news on all the time. And like, admittedly, it was a really contentious time in the country. Like there was a lot of strife because of the Syrian refugee crisis. And I remember like, I think a day or two before I left, there was a huge car bombing in Tripoli, I believe is the name of the city. Oh God, it's gonna look bad if that's wrong. But I remember literally being on the plane, and like my parents just like, you know, like, oh look, there it is in the newspaper, like that's where you want to go. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's going to be an important experience. And even on the plane, like sitting next to some Lebanese guy who was like, you're going to die here. And I was like, what the fuck? So when I finally got to like, basically it was like, I don't know, like the school where I was going to be living, I had been made so paranoid by like news reports and just like all these, you know, stories of like kidnapping and shit that my parents were bringing up, that by the time I got to like my building, I was exhausted from the flight. I got to my bedroom, I like got undressed. Oh, you know, like international flights, you're just so fucking tired. So I laid down on my bed. It's probably like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Lebanon time. And I hear like something in the hallway, and it sounds like, you know, like low muttering, and, you know, people getting like closer and closer to my door. And my first thought is someone's here to kidnap and kill me. So I bolted up, grabbed like, I was like, what can I use? And I grabbed, I think, my belt, and I stood behind the door, and I was just like, I'll choke him. When the terrorists come in here to get me, I'll choke him. And I probably stood there like frozen in my fucking underwear for like a minute before realizing that like it was probably just my fucking neighbors in the building. And then I was just like seeing myself like outside of my body, standing behind a door in my underwear, holding a belt, getting ready to choke a fucking terrorist. Like they're just gonna come one at a time or something. Like, oh my God, Ahmed's getting choked. Like, well, let's wait until he's done, and then we'll try to take him on. So, but yeah, it's just like it's insane, like what this sort of media coverage does in terms of like convincing you that like the world is out to get you, and like you're nothing more than a potential victim, and like unless you take action, like the NRA utilizes the same type of thinking to fucking sell guns. Right.
Yeah, it's exactly the law and order thing that you were talking about with Trump and with Reagan and with all the Republicans for who knows how long. So yeah, so I don't know. It feels like maybe a heavy-handed comparison, honestly, and I'm sure a lot of people would disagree. But I it's weird because when you talk about Lebanon, I also think like, okay, well, maybe you should have been a little concerned. Like, I wouldn't tell you to go to Iran or Myanmar or, you know, like a lot of these places where things are like really dangerous, or, you know, I don't know. Iraq, for instance. So like, I wouldn't tell you to go there either. And like your family telling you like, hey, consider the fact that there is like actually terrorism here, and, you know, like there are bombings, and you did actually end up getting kidnapped. Like maybe some of the advice was like kind of fair, you know? So
I wasn't kidnapped. I was detained in like a legal center for being in the wrong part of town. It's different. It's not the same.
Okay, well, we could talk about that another time.
They've got seats Hezbollah has seats in parliament. They're pretty legit.
Did they at the time?
Oh yeah, they did. I mean, it's like the version of things that we get. It's just I feel like it's so oversimplified. Now, I'm sure that the same logic applies to murder. But again, it goes back to what we said at the beginning of the episode. Like, how do you have a logical conversation about something like a sensitive an issue as well. So yeah, some people are going to die. It's like, well, I would not like that to be me. I'm sure you would not like that to be you. So like, what do we need to do to make sure that maybe no one dies?
Yeah, I guess the question boils down to is like, how much of this kind of content do you consume to have a rational appreciation or expectation of violence around you, so that it doesn't get overblown or overrepresented in your own mind? And I guess like you had a really interesting captain's log about this, and it was just like, it's kind of talking similar. Like if the question is like, how much should you consume at all to have a healthy appreciation for crime? Like, why would you consume? That's a weird sentence. But
I just need a healthy appreciation of some crime.
Just a fair amount. But like you kind of ask the questions like, why consume true crime at all? Because obviously there's other ways to get to understand, to get a feel for what crime is. It's weird because I feel like we do have like a very innate idea of what what crime is and whatever. So it's weird to have like this other medium of it. But I guess I'll let you try and explain it here in your captain's log.
So I think a big part of diving into true crime for me this week was trying to get to the bottom of like maybe why it was so interesting, at least for other people. And like, here's the thing: it's like it's definitely salacious, it's definitely scandalous. Like, it's very easy to become engrossed in these stories. Like, it's not hard to do that. But for me, it's just like, all right, like what am I gaining from this? Like necessarily. And I think like beyond the fact that the stories are interestingly told, I'm wondering like what is, if any, there's some sort of like unconscious appeal to this sort of like storytelling and like the true aspect of it too. Not just that the investigative storytelling is interesting and it is suspenseful, but like if there's maybe some other like elements at play that make it so compelling for people. And I think that like, I read this idea that true crime highlights the distinctive connection between public life and private life. And I think like not taking into account the murder stuff, maybe the appeal of true crime genre is like, maybe there's like this kind of unconscious disdain for the existing social order and the way it kind of keeps us all in place and prevents us from really succeeding in leaps and bounds. And there's like a fascination with these stories of people that kind of try to subvert or transcend the social order, social boundaries. And then there's like this like schadenfreudic joy at us being able to witness them not be able to like commit these crimes and then get caught and punished by the existing web of like rules and laws and norms that govern our daily life. And I almost wonder if it like justifies to us this idea that like this subversion or transcendence of social norms and boundaries can't be done. And it's like this like complex psychological affirmation that accompanies this like infantile mantra that crime does not pay. So yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, and I will kick it back to you so you can give me your trademark I don't know, Ian, because that's how you sound.
It's always nice to know that I can count on you for some kind words, Ian. Thank you so much. I also want to say what a beautiful point you made. Well said. I agree with everything you said in there. So just all around good job. Round of applause for Ian.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stop, please. I just want to go on the record and say, past Ian doesn't speak for me. Okay, I don't think you sound like that.
If only it worked like that. But yeah, no, it's an interesting point. So it took me a second to understand what you were saying in that one. But I think if I can put words into your mouth, these will be those words, and it'll say like, you think people consume true crime because it's a way of saying like you deviated from the social contract that we all have, and you, the killer, got fucked by the system, and I'm happy to see it. Is that like kind of what you're saying?
Shay, once again, I could not ask for a better moron brain translator. Like I love that I have you.
Yeah,
this motherfucker's got moron brain.
Isn't moron is like it's like a specific level of IQ, right? Like,
yeah, it's mine.
I definitely thought you were insulting me. Now I'm wondering, were you insulting yourself?
Yes, no, I
thought you were saying moron brain, like way to take all of my big words and bring it down to simple
I'm
moron
saying
brain.
I had a what was that, a 2-minute clip of mouth diarrhea, and then you come in here and you're like, I think we could salvage some of these ingredients. You give it
Well, all right, so this is what I think. I think for the most part, you're right about this. I think that when people are like, yes, that person got what was coming to them, like, fuck them, I want to see them rot in jail. But there are, I think, very popular subgenres of true crime, like the cold case, like the unsolved mysteries, where you never see what happens. And those are, I think, also very appealing to people for what I think has to be a totally different reason.
What do you think it is? Like, if you just had to guess.
I think it's that, and actually there was an article that talks about this, is like, do you identify with a serial killer? Is that what's going on? And if I can just quote this article here, this is from bustle.com. It's a publication that I don't read, so I actually don't really know much about it. But anyway, here I go quoting it. They say true crime's appeal goes far beyond neurotransmitters, however. The experts Bustle spoke with all agreed that true crime genre has something to tell us about ourselves as individuals, in addition to providing valuable insight into the minds of cold-blooded killers. And then in quotes, I think that why we enjoy true crime is related to why we enjoy fiction in general, says York University professor Raymond A. Marr. And that's because fiction is really about other people and their relationships. In a way, it could be considered a matter of vicarious psychology in that a majority of people will never know what it's like to commit a murder or a heinous crime. So by reading it, it's sort of intrinsically fascinating to us because we're fascinated at other people, Marr says. What do you think of that?
So on one hand, I agree with that. And then on the second hand, I'm like, but isn't this kind of the problem? Because again, like this idea, this rationalization, this excuse making of like, oh, but it's just like fiction. It's not fucking fiction. Somebody was fucking murdered. And it's just like this idea that like, it's so funny. I think about like, I spent some time, and we'll talk about this a little more later, but like I researched, and I think you did too, the history of true crime a little bit. And I know that like back in the day, the point of making these like sensational true crime stories was to basically get people to like submit to the law of God. They're like, this is what happens when you stray from God. Like it starts with skipping church. And then the next thing you know, you're like your fucking grandma's with a and I mean, but
Christ.
It's no, but it's just like, that's the kind of shit. So it's like, it's weird because I see the same kind of thing, only like now we're worshiping at the altar of capitalism and like everything is fair game. Like the point isn't to try to like scare people straight. It's to just like keep people entertained, you know? So it's like, I think maybe that's where I have the problem with it. But at the same time, I probably fell into that trap this week listening to some of these stories. And it's just like, how would I get rid of a body?
Yeah.
It's like, thinking, not even like thinking like, okay, like but like if Julian, maybe even if like Julian went missing and I'm like, oh my God, like would people think I killed her? Like, how would that even look? Like, were you guys fighting? No, we didn't fight. We got along great. Like, how would I react? Like, I'm already like emotionally weird. Like, I'd be like, this motherfucker's not crying enough, or like, this guy's crying a little too much, you know?
Well, what's interesting is I think I mentioned this in Ignorance to the Bottle, but I had already kind of been watching this YouTube channel called JCS Criminal Psychology, and I watched a lot more of it this past week. And it's mostly criminal depositions, so you're just watching the deposition. But what I learned from watching that was, one, it's incredibly hard to fake innocence. That you just like what we do when we're actually innocent versus what we do when we're guilty pretending to be innocent is very different. So if you are actually innocent, then in most cases, like there's a lot of telltale signs. Like, all right, well, you're doing all of these things that typically falsely accused people do. However, there are the opposites. You know, like people like you and me who I think are a little, I don't know, maybe we're not as different as maybe everyone just thinks they're different. But there was like this one guy, and I'm sorry, I know you had a point, but right now I'm on a roll.
I'll wait. Yeah, you're doing a great job. That's why I dialed back. You can see it was like getting really close, and I'm like, no, let him fly, let him breathe.
So I listened to this one. It was a falsely accused man, and it was a guy, a young black man, and I'm pretty sure it was in England, and they were, or somewhere in the UK, and someone had just burgled a store, and this cop like came around a corner, lost the guy, thought he saw him, tackled him, and the guy was just like, what the fuck's going on? And then they lied to him. They're like, we have you on camera. We know it's you. We have eyewitnesses. We're not asking why. In fact, we have all the information we need. And they were all lying. This is all just lies. They're like, just tell us about it in your own words. And he's like, I understand that you have this opinion, but it's just not correct. I'm very surprised to hear that you have this on camera because that doesn't make sense given my circumstance. And apparently the way he was reacting was very consistent with a person who was lying in that circumstance. But really what ended up happening, he was just a very patient and respectful dude. So he was just like saying like, and I feel like you and I would kind of be like that. We'd be like, I'm sorry, like I understand that you think I did this, but I need to tell you I really didn't. So I don't.
I love the idea that we're being so respectful to the people accusing us of murder. Like, we're starting with it's like a therapy thing, right? Like starting like I feel sentences. Okay, like I feel like you're under the impression that I killed my wife, and I'm feeling a little accused right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's. Did you have more to say? Because if not, I have.
It's all you, brother. No, it's all you.
Well, because I'm so glad you bring that up, because now that you've had that experience and gotten to watch that and gotten a little bit of research in this surprised me, because then this was what I was also surprised by about this camp as well. I was like, okay, earlier I talked about people kind of oh, I'm interested in true crime because of the psychology of it. And I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, you just like reading about psychos. But after the murders, after the crimes, there really is like this psychological cat and mouse game that gets played with family members and investigators and police and newspapers. And it's just like, holy shit, like this is really interesting. Like this is like a really dangerous dance that everybody's playing, like trying to catch somebody committing a crime and then trying to get away with the crime. And like, I can't think of maybe a more like high stakes individual exchange with another person. And like a big part of this is lying. And a lot of these true crime shows are always like, oh, you could tell he was lying because X, Y, Z. Oh, that's telltale lying. So I want to ask you some questions, and I want you to tell me if this is indicative of a lie. Okay, like, so these are some cues that like investigators work with, and I want you to tell me if these are associated with lying. Okay, so hesitations. All right, so number one in the Shea, are they lying test? Vocal cues, hesitation.
Lying.
No actual relationship to lying. Speech
I didn't know
errors.
there was a no answer. All right, now, all right.
No, lying. Okay, let me phrase it. Associated with lying or no relation. Okay, so hesitations, use of speech fillers, we already said no actual relationship.
Gotcha.
Okay. Speech errors, grammatical errors, word or sentence repetition, false starts, sentence change, sentence incompletion, slip of the tongue.
I'm gonna so speech errors. I'm gonna say none.
Okay, yeah, no actual relationship. Yeah. You're right. High pitched voice.
High pitched voice related with lying. I don't know. The fact that you're asking me adds like this extra layer to it. Like if I just had to think, okay.
You're not going to go to jail for murder if you get this wrong.
You know what's funny is I feel like I am somehow. Like there's like some real, I'm just like, okay, I'm in the deposition room. It's like, do I have a high-pitched voice or not? Been watching so much true crime. I'm going to say high-pitched voice. Yeah, man, if I were lying, would I go up here? Like, I mean, maybe. I'm going to go with no. I'm going to say it has nothing to do with anything.
Yes, there's an actual relationship between high-pitched voice and lying.
What's the relationship?
You get nervous and your voice goes up.
It goes up, okay.
You think I killed her?
I didn't kill her. You double-dipped a chip.
You become Jerry Seinfeld. Murder, she wrote. I didn't even write a thank you letter.
That's pretty good.
Right. Speech rate. Increased speech rate.
I'm gonna guess. Fuck, I don't know. I'm gonna say no relation. I think falsely accused people are supposed to get very agitated.
No relationship to lying. You're right. Pauses.
That's what I thought when you said hesitation. I thought that's.
Oh, sorry. No, pauses.
Right.
Long pauses. I'm
gonna try again, and I'm gonna say pauses do have a. Actually, from what I learned, they were saying that people will just talk to buy time. So I'm gonna say now that I'm trying to buy time, I'm gonna say no relation.
You are correct. No relation. All right. So there's a lot here. I'm not going to ask you everyone, but I'm going to just go through some of these that I thought were very interesting. So gaze aversion, like looking away. A relationship with lying or not?
Relationship with lying, yes.
No actual relationship.
Shut
with lying.
up. Fuck you.
I apparently
You're lying.
Okay. Let's see. Fidgeting.
I say yeah, probably.
Yes, associated relationship with lying. Facial fidgeting, like touching your face, rubbing your hair.
I'm gonna say yeah.
No relationship with lying.
The fidgeting's in the word.
It's like body fidgeting. Body fidgeting versus like doing facial fidgeting. Like
Okay.
Let's see here. Leg and foot movements, like shaking your leg.
Yes.
No actual relation.
Yeah.
I already have no actual relationship with lying.
Yeah.
Eye blinks, rapid blinking of the eyes.
I think that's involved. That's related to sleeping. Rapid eye movement. It's called REM. Heard of it much? I have no idea.
No relationship with lying. So basically, like, in this entire list here that I have of things that people commonly associate with lying, like, oh, he's looking away, he's lying. On this entire list, there are only 2 things that are actually associated with lying: fidgeting and high-pitched voice.
Oh, wow.
And then one thing, illustrations, like hand and arm movements, like where you're like, no, like she was over there and then I was over here. You're more likely to be Italian. So,
Oh my god.
no, so people think that means you're lying. That's associated with truth telling.
That's interesting because I that makes sense to me. Like you're like you have an actual mental picture and you're like you're making it physical. You're realizing it in that way.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Well, anyway, that has been the Camp Education edition of Truth or Lie, of fidgety, blinky, pause. Anyway, so Shay, you had a captain's log, and I thought it was very good, and I think we're going to play it right now.
Sounds great, Ian. Thank you. So, during the first day of True Crime Camp, I remember lying down in bed with my girlfriend, watching the Netflix show I Am Murderer, and hearing the very detailed description of a woman being abused and nearly killed by her partner, and writhing in bed, squirming, just feeling so uncomfortable by the detail, and thinking to myself, I'm not sure if I can continue on with this camp because of how uncomfortable those depictions were making me feel. But I powered through, and then by the next day I felt a little bit better, and by the following day after that, it wasn't a big deal for me at all. To the point where last night I was trying to put something on, and honestly I was finding myself a little bit bored by the story. So I was like, I've heard all this stuff before. Like, come on, let me hear something like really fucked up. Like I want to really see like some like brutal shit. And then I started feeling like this just feels like I'm chasing a fucking high. And it's a high, it's content that is inherently based on watching other people, or like other people have to die or be abused or be fucked up somehow for this content to be made. And something about that feels inherently wrong. And so I'm going back to the question that you posed, way back in podcast camp. Like, is this just a fucked up medium? Like, should we even allow for this type of content to be made or not? Or are there benefits that somehow outweigh this kind of possibly immoral, shaky ground? So let me know what you think.
You and I are really, what's so interesting is this is like the first camp I feel like we've really been on the same page where like there feels, I don't think I've ever encountered a medium that is so entertaining that I've been like so conflicted by in terms of my aversion to, and like I have actively avoided it, like listening to some of these shows and episodes and stuff. And I talk about this in podcast camp, listening to, like you said, a grisly fucking description of like someone's lowest, most awful fucking moment. And then they're like, what happened to Stephanie's entrails? We'll find out after a word from our sponsor, Vidal Sassoon. And it's just like, it's hard to like get over that like weird invasion of commercialism.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the reasons that we share such similar opinions is because I don't think I had a very strong opinion of true crime until we talked about it in podcast camp, frankly. Like I remember being like, I don't think I really watched this or like know anything about it. But watching it this last week has been really fascinating. The feelings of just the arc, the emotional arc that I've taken over the past week of just watching it all the time and watching it with my girlfriend has been intense. And like, I remember my girlfriend telling me that she used to watch it all the time and had to eventually stop because she was getting like panic attacks basically and nightmares. And
whoa,
I was doing just a little bit of research on it. And apparently that's a pretty common reaction to consuming too much true crime, which I guess makes sense because it's like horror movies that are true. You know, that's effectively what you're watching. You know, it's just like, instead of it being a ghost, it's like, this actually happened. We can go to the physical place where all of this, took place and whatever. But the consumption of it was really interesting to me. And actually, in that same Bustle article that I mentioned earlier, there was a really good paragraph about it. So again, here comes a quote. Cue music. Adrenaline is a stimulant, so you get that kind of excited, energetic feeling, Daramis says. When there's an actual, real-life emergency, it's what makes you stronger and faster. But just sitting there watching a movie is what helps you get excited about the movie. She explains that your brain can produce endorphins, which act as mild opiates. So, like any painkiller, they are a little bit addictive. Your brain also produces dopamine and serotonin, which Daramis says create a wicked combination. Those feel-good chemicals get mixed in with the chemicals that usually happen when you're scared. It's like a particular cocktail of chemicals. I'm scared, and it's fun. Which, all of that, I absolutely felt this past week, and I was just like, no, I want more of this. Like, fuck me up, Dad. Like, show me some vile shit, you know?
Fuck me up, Dad. Let's watch more porn together on the dog bed.
That's too real.
So, yeah, you know what the thought that just crossed my mind hearing you say that and hearing us have this conversation is like, are we being like a little bit conservative on this? Are we being kind of like, what's so funny is I feel like this is our version of being pro-life. It's like being anti-torture entertainment is our version of being like, no, like I'm pro-life, not pro like last painful 24 hours of this person's life and then how the fucking person disposed of their corpse and evaded the authorities while their parents were devastated. And it's like the fucking commodification of a person's lowest fucking moments, like their final fucking moments. And like I don't know if I can necessarily tell you what the problem is, but I have a fucking problem with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do too. I think overall, but I don't feel as strongly about it as you have historically felt about it. Like I do think I agree with you. Like I think there's something like slightly off about it. It's like it's immoral, it's dark. But I don't know. Somehow I don't know, I'm like they're dead. Who cares? They're dead now. It's over. Their time's gone. Now it's time for us to be amused on our daily commutes or like while we're doing dishes. Like I want to hear about how he sawed your head off. Like you had your time being alive and then your death was so interesting that I want to hear it while I'm eating dinner or breakfast, before work.
Yikes. Man, that's an interesting fucking take. Like that's like a very secular scientific view, right? Like do you think what is there some sort of like card you can fill out, like being an organ donor? Like, oh, he's an organ donor. Oh, and we can make a podcast about this.
That's a fascinating parallel, actually. It's like, yeah, you can use my carcass for science afterwards. It's like organ doning, but no one organ donoring,
organ boning. Yeah. That's
God.
What some of these serial killers do.
Oh my God. Nice. But
let's call the episode organ boning.
But actually, that's an incredibly interesting parallel. Like there is no organ donor for like a podcast true crime. I guess just a true crime consent form you fill out on your license. It's like, yeah, if I die in a gruesome death, fine, you can use my death as commercial, as fodder for your murderino hard-on, you know?
Well, it's almost like if I found out, okay, so let's say my sister was murdered and I found out like in just an awful, awful way, and I found out some podcast made a fucking show about her, I would be like, compensate my family.
Yeah.
I was like, I did not give you permission to do this. Like, that is my sister's life. Like, you have reduced her to like a 30-minute soundbite. Fuck you, pay me.
Yeah.
I think that would be my response.
Fuck you, pay me. I think that's fair, man. It's funny because on
fuck you, pay me.
on Netflix's I Am a Murderer, it's like a series where they have this is really interesting. Every single episode is it's from the perspective almost of the serial killer. I mean, it's them talking and they get a platform, and like they'll do a little bit of talking to the family of the victim as well, but almost without fail at the end of every episode, they're like, they put like a little disclaimer. It's like, we tried to speak with the family of this victim, but they actually did not want to participate at all, and in fact think that what we're doing is wrong. Is like effectively what they're saying at the end. And I was just like, do you not think it's wrong? Yeah, like clearly people are like, the people who are most affected by what you're doing are upset with you, and you're just like, but I'm making so much money. You know?
Yeah. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, and I'm gonna fuck it up. But did you ever read Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher?
No, I don't read books.
it's like a pamphlet.
Don't read those either. But yeah, go ahead.
But he says something along the lines of like, the reason capitalism is such like an effective system is because it turns everything into a commodity, including activism. And I wonder if like a lot of these shows, especially the ones that are again like covering the murders of women, they're like, no, like this is activism. Like we're bringing light to injustices against like female bodies and women. And then people listening to it, they're like, yeah, I'm an activist. And like, really, you're not, like, because you're not doing anything to be disruptive. Like, as a matter of fact, like you're placating yourself even more in a way, because you're like, oh, instead of using this time to do anything, I'm just going to like vacuum the house, smoke a joint, and listen to stories of people getting their heads sawed off and their skulls fucked. So it's like, but it's funny because like I'm kind of being graphic, maybe for like shock value, but it's like, oh, that's so shocking. It's like, is it any more shocking than somebody like actually reading it and just like making producing an hour-long show every week about the shit that happens to people? Like I don't know.
I don't think it is, man. I mean, it's interesting, and I mean, I think what it is for some people, and you touch on this, is like, I think it is just like people really like seeing the darkness in other people, and you have a captain's log about this. It's like people just want to see they just want to see evil people. They want to see like look it in the eyes, I guess, and see like what an evil person does. And I don't know. You talk about this in your next captain's log, so we'll just go ahead and play that now.
So one of the things that I read this week was basically kind of a history of true crime, starting in Germany after the arrival of the printing press. And I thought this was really interesting, but basically they were saying that like true crime was, there was a strong parallel at the time between crime and sin, and it was used almost in like this propagandistic sense to basically convince people to continue to work within the church, or work with the church. And it's interesting like reading these stories now and listening to these stories now, because honestly, like, I don't think that there's that much of a difference between the way they were telling these stories then and the way they were telling these stories now. It doesn't feel like it's veered too off this track, and I don't know, it's because like maybe, how much can you really do with these stories, and like the way to make them interesting has kind of remained the same throughout the ages. But it seems that there is this like idea that it's more of a case study in evil, and personally, I don't believe in evil, because I think evil is a religious construction designed to relinquish responsibility and, kind of take it out of your hands, that there's nothing you can do for some people, that some people are beyond help because evil is just something that exists sometime, somewhere in human nature. So it's like, kind of like I talked about in the interview with Matthew Neal, I feel like there's this deep-seated desire to believe that evil exists because it implies the existence of like an absolute moral good. And like in reading up on these like, you know, pretty fucking heinous acts this past week, like Shay, I kind of want to ask you point blank, do you believe in evil? And like not evil as in like the literary concept, but like, or not evil as in the adjective, but like evil as in the concept. Like, do you believe that some people are evil? Shay, do ya?
So
do you believe in evil?
So I think like evil, you know, the dualism between good and bad, I think it's the shield that people hide behind so that they can do really fucked up shit with the assumptions like, well, I'm not evil, therefore I'm in a category of good, and anything I do is therefore excused as a good person's actions, maybe a mistake, maybe whatever. But everyone, if you are a dualist, which I think like most religious people like de facto are, believe in good and evil, then you put yourself in the camp of good, and then all of your actions then are almost always forgivable in some context, which I think is like fair. Like actions, like everyone makes mistakes, but I think that having that mindset allows you to do actually more fucked up shit because you believe deep down that there are good actions when really there is no objective good and evil. There's nuanced behaviors and actions that have varying outcomes, and we want positive outcomes, and that's just what the gradient should be. So I guess like all of that to say, no, I agree with you. Evil's bullshit. It's a fucking bullshit construction that people just use to advance whatever their fucking position is at any given time.
Their agenda,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. It's rare for us, I feel like, to be on the same page. So this is a nice change of pace. Just for us both to be like, yeah. Usually we're kind of
fuck evil.
Yeah, fuck evil.
Yeah.
No, but like I feel the same way. Like, and I feel like it's just, you know, it's so funny. Like Rick DeSantis recently is like, you know, from now on in schools, communism will be taught of as an evil institution, and it's like that's not a way to like train adults to be productive members of society, to be able to point in things and be like, this can't be reasoned with, it's evil. Right. There's no logic to this. There's no personhood in this. It's evil. And like, that's the kind of thinking that allows us to do shit like drop nuclear bombs on a fucking country. So it's just like, I hate that conversation, but it's a word that comes up a lot. And it's just like, it's weird because, you know, there are certain American characters who I feel like would quote unquote fit the bill. But then when like you take the basic like baby steps into developmental psychology, you're like, oh yeah, it turns out like John Wayne Gacy's dad fucking beat the shit out of him and like made him wear a bra and threw bottles at his fucking head. Like these people, like they're not, you know, psychopaths born out of nothing. Like they usually all had like really fucked up childhoods and shit. And that's not even to say that like psychopathy isn't a thing. Like I know you can be born with these sorts of conditions, but it's like that's psychology, right? Like there's probably fucking medicine you can take to fix that shit. So yeah, I don't know. It's not a conception I buy into, and it's not one that I think is constructive. And it sounds like you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do, man. And actually, you touched on something that like I was thinking, and honestly, like this is like a feeling I had that I felt pretty uncomfortable with, like while watching all this true crime. But what was weird is I think, and maybe this is somewhat different than what you were actually just saying, but it reminded me of this. It was just like watching the especially the criminal depositions of these people. It was really hard for me to not see the humanity in these people who've done these really fucked up acts in some aspects. Like, I mean, like seeing people like the Chris Watt one was really insane. And I don't know if you know him, but he smothered his two daughters. And then when his pregnant wife came home, he smothered her as well. And then it's really fucked up. And then like drove them out into like this oil field or something. And then like forced them, like had to like really push to like shove them into these giant oil tanks or whatever. Really gruesome shit. But it was still weird. Like hearing him talk, like I still like felt the humanity in there, and which was kind of alarming to me. I was like, this man did something like so gruesome and inexcusable that it's just like really like nauseating almost to a sense. But that doesn't mean that I like when he was lying, like I like almost believed it a little bit still. And it reminded me of this idea that apparently people who are more empathic are more susceptible to false appeals to emotion. And I think that you and I imagine would fall into this category. Like, and I have people who report to me at my job. And it's interesting when like something happens or something screws up and they say something like, oh, well, I have like, there's like a family issue that's going on. Like I have to leave or something like that. I'm just like, oh shit, man, I am so sorry. Like, do whatever you need to do. Like go take care of your stuff. And it's like, well, did I just get played? You know, it's like almost what I think, but it's like, I mean, I'd rather get played than falsely accuse someone, I guess is the issue. But I don't know. It's interesting because there is like this weird empathic relationship in seeing the humanity in people. But it's weird when there is psychopathy and like, I don't know, what do you call it? Like near evil, like people who are very poorly behaved is that what that is?
You know, you're going to hate me, but I'm going to answer your question with a question. And then I've got another question for you. So just be ready. 2 of them are coming.
Sure.
I got 2 bullets in the chamber. Do you think people are at their root good or bad? And when I ask you this question, it's weird because I'm almost asking you to consider our base animal instincts.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when I'm asking that question, I'm not asking about like human beings socially. You know what? It's weird because we're social animals, so I think we think of ourselves socially, but maybe individually, are we good or bad at our base?
Good. I think. Well, I have 2 answers. One, good. I don't think.
Is the other one bad?
The other one is bad. No, the other one is like. I mean, obviously, it's a question that like. It's like almost a meaningless question because it's like we get to decide the terms. So it's like, are we good or bad? It's like, well, we say we're good because we want to be good, and like we also decide what good and bad is. I don't know, but I think like, okay, yeah, like what is good? Like, what are the good things? Like, if we're going to say like, oh, they're qualities that we as humans value, those are good things. And do we put them in the good category? It's like, well, yes, because they're human values. So like by default, things we will like will be good. And we will see ourselves in that category. You know what I mean?
I think that's a good answer. Honestly, that's a tough question, and I appreciate you even trying to tackle it. So I think maybe a good question to end this with before we delve into our final thoughts. We talked kind of at the beginning. It's like how do we have a rational conversation about like crime? How do we have like a rational discussion involving policy when we're talking about such a sensationalist emotional topic? Especially, imagine having this conversation with somebody who is like the parent of a murdered son or daughter or child.
Sure.
So here's my question for you, man. If we're kind of thinking about like, I don't know, reform in terms of like our justice system and like the way we think about crime in general, what would you want your murderer's punishment to be?
What would I want?
If you were murdered, yeah, like what? I mean, what are we talking? You want 20 years for them? You want like you just want some therapy for them and like reintroduce them into society? Like, what would you want if you were murdered by someone? What would you want their punishment to be?
I don't honestly, man. I don't fucking know. Like punishment. I it's weird because it's like, I don't know if I even believe in punishment. I think like
same.
I think what I would rather have happen is have them. It's like more like reformation, like just like, therapy, lots of intense therapy. Like maybe like, I don't think this idea exists in the United States, but you take them out of a situation where they can cause harm to other people and like do some deep psychological work on the person and just like make sure that that never happens again, that, they develop the patience and passivity and self-control and whatever, they need in order to make sure that something like that never happens again. And then, let them go. Like, I don't know, like, you killed me because you fucked up is like probably what it is. Or you like lacked in some like crucial way. It's like, is it your fault that necessarily that you did that? I mean, it sucks for like, it would suck for me and for like people in my life. But like, I don't know, like it should be like, yeah, you were dealt a shitty hand as a kid and you were like John Wayne Gacy, like beaten and whatever. And for that, you will suffer for as an adult too, for all the decisions and actions you make. I know I'm taking away agency here, like in this calculation, but like common question in camp re-education, what is free will anyway, right? Do we even have it? So I don't know, like, do you just punish people who are like hurt, the things that say hurt people? Like, are we gonna hurt the hurt people who hurt people?
I love that. I want that on a mug. Are we going to hurt the hurt people who hurt people?
Right. So.
And that's one of the notes I wrote earlier. It's like I feel like we need to shift this conversation away from punishment to like purely rehabilitation. Like how do we punish? How do we rehabilitate? Like why destroy 2 lives? Like if someone takes me out, like what is taking them out gonna do?
Right.
Like put them in a position to maybe like take care of my family or something like that. Like, because I know, what's so funny is I'm reminded of, I think it was during like the Rwandan genocide. A lot of the people who committed some of these atrocities, I guess, like it's a means of reconciliation. Like they would find the parents of the sons that they killed and be like, I'm your son's killer. And like, I'm here to take care of you.
That's beautiful. I actually love that.
It's weird to call it beautiful. It is, but also at the same time, it's like, I murdered your son. Can I mow your lawn? It's just like, yes.
I don't know, man. It's weird. Like,
it's like, but yeah, like, where do you go? I mean, like, honestly, it's like the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, right? Everyone in that situation is a victim,
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
There's no one in that situation who doesn't walk away extremely fucked up, either dead or just will never psychologically be the same. Will never ever recover, be the same person. Like You've seen horrors, committed atrocities. Like, yeah. Should we final thoughts?
Yeah, let's go to final thoughts. But before we do, Ian, should we tell them about our Patreon?
I absolutely think we should. Hi, I'm Ian Rowe of Camp Free Education. I'm here to tell you about our Patreon. If you like Camp Free Education content and you want more and more and more, all you have to do is subscribe to our Patreon. We have $3, $5, and $7 levels, so you can get everything you need. If you want behind the scenes shit, if you want extra episodes, if you want captain's logs or commercial things, it's all there for you. It's all there for you.
All right, and now we begin our final thoughts segment of the episode. Nothing weird about that transition there.
Absolutely nothing.
So, Ian, it's been 1 week of true crime. We have feelings, we have thoughts about them. We've just delineated them for basically the last hour and a half. But how do we want to put? What's the bow that we're putting on this episode? What's that look like for you?
So, my final thought is, I think, a lingering question, man, and it really is like I don't know how to have the rational conversation about, about like true crime about crime in general. Like it really is, I think, kind of like there's that saying like cops don't prevent crime, they create crime. And I do know, right? Like right now we are in the middle of like a fucking panic because there's been a 4% increase in murders, not like other kinds of crime, but it's so funny. It's like, I don't know the statistics or like the facts behind those murders. Like I don't know if those are domestic. I don't know if those are like botched robberies. I don't know if that's gun violence that they're counting. Like I don't know what they're counting as that number. But there's this like push nationally to be like, fuck, we were talking about defunding the police and now this happened. Shit, it's a correlation. Even though a lot of these cities actually gave more money to the police, even though Biden ended up giving like more military gear to the fucking cops. So it's like, I don't know how to just be like, we're overreacting and then have someone, come back and be like, my baby was murdered. So it's like, I don't know how you can reconcile logic with against tragedy. Like I feel like I'm stuck. I'm not smart enough to do that.
So you're feeling stuck on the idea of just like how to prevent violent crime.
Not even how to prevent, but like, I guess, I don't know, like how to, it goes back again, like, and we read about that statistic, like men are more likely to get, murdered or whatever. And it's weird that that's a sensitive sexist issue. And I should probably admittedly like do more research into that. Cause like, I don't know, man, like men, aren't they just like usually murdered in like a fight or something, like a street fight? They just get their head kicked in. As opposed to women who were like fucking thrown in the back of a trunk and like brought to a warehouse and like raped on a bed of nails. Like it's usually like, isn't it usually like the situations are more fucked up because they tend to be like more misogynistic as opposed to like men's deaths are more on accident? Like, is it that women's deaths tend to be more premeditated? Like, there's just like all of this information, and then there's the information about the information, and it's just like I'm just swimming in it, and I don't totally know what to do with it. So I think that's what I need to make my focus for the upcoming week.
Yeah. Well, just to touch briefly on that, I think what the little bit of research I saw was that most of the women are more likely to be victims of domestic abuse, from murder of domestic issues. Domestic homicides, 63.7% of women are victims of domestic homicides. And I think the reason it's so fucked up is 81.7 are of victims from sexually related homicides are women. So so like they're very clearly like victims in like a more heinous sense of
as opposed to like if you're a guy, I don't know, like you get drunk and you just start swinging on someone and then like they knock you. I don't know what it is shot either.
Yeah, you just get shot and drug out to a ditch or something. I don't know.
Yeah, probably more violent. I don't know. You're in the mob.
Yeah.
You're like, you don't disrespect me. These are brand new Nikes. And then someone's like, fuck you. I have a gun, a knife gun. Shoot knives in your face.
Yeah.
Die.
Yeah. Classic.
I just described crime very successfully.
So I guess my final thoughts for the week. I think I'm coming away from week 1 pretty much with all my opinions intact, if not maybe reinforced by everything I've learned. I think I still have like
those weeks,
slightly negative opinion of true crime. But I think there is a lot of nuance to be determined in, I guess, like particularly like how much is too much. And so I think maybe my answer to like the question of true crime is just like, what is moderation? Which is like, seems like a kind of a personal choice for everyone. It's like how much of this can you handle before you start becoming a conservative or like getting anxiety? And it's like, well, when you start feeling like a conservative or feeling like you're anxious, stop watching true crime, problem solved.
Or like you were telling me with Stephanie, like when you start having nightmares and anxiety, like turn it off, man, walk away.
Dude, just a quick aside. I know we're at the end of it, but when I was 10, I got Slim Shady's album. I don't remember which one it was. And
was it the one where him and Haley are standing at the edge of the dock and they're like looking down where he just dropped off his wife?
Maybe, yeah. It's the one that has the song. I think it might just be called Kim, where he's murdering Kim in the trunk. Such a fucking graphic song.
Yeah, man.
And I remember I was 10 years old. I remember very vividly taking my mom outside, or like talking to my mom outside and telling her that I was afraid of my stepdad. And she's like, why are you afraid of your stepdad? And I was just like, I don't know. I think he's just going to hurt us. And then she's like, what are you talking about? Like, why? And I was like, I don't know. It's like the song. And she's like, what song? And then I showed her the song and she's like, you cannot listen to this anymore. And she took it, or I don't know what, it went away. And I stopped listening to it, and I was no longer afraid of my stepdad. I was like, oh, you're right. Like,
wow.
I was just afraid because I kept hearing this like fucking gruesome story about like Slim Shady killing his wife, and I was just like, I don't want him to hurt my mom or me, So
I love the idea that like in this story, your mom is like, what is it, the good witch of the East in Wizard of Oz? Like she just like waves her wand and like the album disappears, and you're like, oh, mommy,
wow. You solved everything.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's it for my final thoughts.
Well, I think we've got, honestly, we've got a lot to think about moving forward. I think the goal for the next week is to actually make a true crime episode, put our money where our mouth is, and see what we can come up with. So I think next week, we're going to take a little bit more time on that. I think next week, we're going to hit you with another little sleepover, little sleep-a-rooney, little nap time. And then we're going to come back hard with some like A+ pornographic. Oh God!
Just so hard with this A+ porno.
A+ porno, yeah. Well, I mean, torture porn, whatever. Yeah, we're gonna come at you with some grade A torture porn. All right. Well, without further ado, thank you for turning in. And I think, ooh, what's that? Music to my ears. I think I hear the smooth, silky stylings of today's musical guest, Willie Shaw, and it sounds like this boy needed somebody.
Another love down, she cried, where do you go when you hide out? As if I even knew, babe, but I know it's driving you crazy. Now that she's gone, I think I see where it goes wrong. I never think that I'm enough, so instead of giving you up, I drag you down, 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 down. Baby, I'm sorry, just needed somebody to tell me I'm alright, to say I'm the only one. It almost killed you, having to love me didn't mean to hurt you. Just needed somebody, just needed somebody, just needed somebody. Body to hold, the house fill up the space this high. Go, talk about the future like it was ever gonna work. So fake to make believe until you tangle in a web of dreams. You're seeing diamonds, taking lead. I'm taking lead. Yeah, I drag you down, 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 down. Baby, I'm sorry, just needed somebody to tell me I'm alright, to say I'm the only one. It almost killed you, having to love me didn't mean to hurt you. Just needed somebody, just needed somebody, just needed somebody. Yeah, fake to make believe until you tangle in a web of dreams. You're seeing diamonds, taking lead. I'm taking lead. Baby, I'm sorry, just needed somebody to tell me I'm alright, to say I'm the only one. It almost killed you, having to love me didn't mean to hurt you. Just needed somebody. Baby, I'm sorry, just needed somebody to tell me I'm alright, to say I'm the only one. It almost killed you, having to love me didn't mean to hurt you. Just needed somebody, just needed somebody, just needed somebody, just needed somebody.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. To hear more great content, become a monthly supporter and join our Patreon, where you'll also get tons of other fun goodies.
You heard right, folks. Here at camp, we love talking over great music. If you want to hear more amazing music like the song you're hearing now, then follow our playlists on Spotify.
Stay tuned next week for the exciting conclusion of True Crime Camp.